Oh, I absolutely love the suffering. It's like that's why you go there. You feel so alive when you're just so focused in the moment. And then the snow bridge just collapsed underneath me, and somehow I was able to just get my ice axe in, my crampons in, and hold on to the rope. And above 8,000 meters, um, you have about 24 hours until you die. You actually get to be yourself. For 1 second, I didn't feel too short or too this or too that. Like what you always kind of feel like you're trying to measure up to some sort of standard.
When you look at like the difference between, say, the backyard mountain, right? The 8,000, 9,000 foot one, how is that different than the kinds of mountains that you're climbing when you're really getting up there?
So the difference is mostly the amount of oxygen that you can get into your system. So it's about 50% of the atmospheric pressure at sea level. So our body needs the oxygen to function aerobically. And when you're doing long distance, what you usually do on the mountains, it you use the aerobic system in your body a lot. So the higher you go, the harder its function.
Is there a point where like you're going up, say, 4,000 meters, 5,000 meters, 6,000 meters? Is it a gradual thing, or is there a point where you're like, oh, you suddenly really notice?
It's quite a bit about acclimatization as well. So our body can adjust to high altitude and the lack of oxygen pretty well. It depends on a person as well. I seem to have the ability to acclimatize pretty easily to higher altitudes.
How long does it take you to kind of get used to the change to the higher altitude?
It takes about 2 weeks to acclimatize entirely. Then again, of course, this depends on the altitude as well. Above 6,500 meters, your body doesn't acclimatize anymore. So after that, the higher you go, the faster your body will just shut down.
Now that's the death zone, right? Is that the
Yes, that is exactly the death zone. And above 8,000 meters, um, you have about 24 hours until you die if you're not on supplemental oxygen. So a lot of climbers use supplemental oxygen to climb high. I've never used it. I never will. And just my style of climbing, going up against the mountain.
how did you kind of get into this?
A lot of my childhood I spent in Ethiopia, and we lived in Addis Ababa, which is like a mountain region itself. I just completely fell in love with the mountains in there. Finland, where I'm from, is completely flat. And in general, I've just always been, I've loved the outdoors and had this like need to get to higher levels. So, or just higher to higher elevations. When I was a kid, my mom always tells this story how I brought this really high chair, like they had guests over. So I brought this chair in front of um, or yeah, in front of everyone and just climbed on top of it and was like very proud of it, how I've now climbed this high chair. I was two.
Now, like when did you really get into the high alpine stuff? Like when did you start doing that?
Well, the extreme high altitude, which is considered to be above 5,000 meters, um, that was, well, my first mountain like that was Kilimanjaro, which is basically, I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but it's a bit of a walk in the park. And it felt like that to me. I was just really excited to be there. And because you do feel the effects of the altitude, my then um, husband, he started puking and um, feeling really, really sick. And I was just like, oh, this is so awesome and this is so fun. And I just didn't, I mean, of course, I was trying to be nice to him and empathetic towards him, but it was just, I thought it was just so cool to feel the challenge of what it brings to you that you're not getting enough oxygen, because there's ways to mitigate that too, like the way you breathe, the way you move. You need to be very strategic when you go up there, especially if you're doing it without supplemental oxygen. So 2016 was the year I got into the higher, and then it's been higher and higher and higher. And
For somebody who's never been up that high, like what is that like?
well, last summer, me and my climbing partner slash nowadays life partner as well slash my coach, we were on Broad Peak, which is above 26,000 feet. And for the first 3 weeks, we were the only two people on the mountain. We climbed without ropes. If we had used ropes, we put them in ourselves. We always carry our own stuff. It's very independent. But when we're tackling a lot of snow, like much more than usual. So how I described it to someone who asked how it feels to climb a mountain, just the two of you, when you're breaking trail, which is like exhausting, especially when the snow is like up to your waist at times, you can't breathe as much oxygen as you would like. So it's kind of like having three face masks on top of each other, and then you're carrying almost half of your weight, and then you're doing like step ups onto a bench at a gym with the weight on and with the masks on, and sometimes the bench just collapses underneath you. So do that for, I don't know, 10,000 reps, and then you get to camp one.
God. Then you get to camp one, right? Then you get to the
Yeah,
first part of like 4 or 5 camps, I'm assuming.
yeah,
Is
4.
God, that sounds really hard. So now to be able to do this, is it simply you need to have this amount of physical training, and everybody and anybody of average athletic ability, if they put in the time training, they could accomplish this? Or do you need to have, there's something about you, your body, the way that you're designed. Do you have to have that, right? Can you just work and get here? Or is like, look, some people genetically can do this and some people just can't.
I do believe that there is quite a bit of genetic predisposition, because so the way I started climbing, like I just dropped everything else, sold my house, and just started climbing like full time. That was 3.5 years ago, after my current coach, Don Bowie. He's one of the best climbers in the world, and we ended up on the same mountain, in the same base camp, and almost no one climbed that year. We were on Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas, almost 7,000 meters. And we made it in a record time, like in really good time, from Camp 2 to the summit in super bad conditions. We were the 10th and the 11th or something like that during that season who had even made it to the summit, because the conditions were just really bad. And I just kind of floated it. I hadn't been training methodically for like this sport. And he was just like, I don't care who you're going to climb with, but you need to start climbing hard. And if you give me a year, I'll make you a beast. So I was like, just a second, I'll do a little arrangement. and yeah, so I got a few sponsors. I was Miss Finland in 2013. And I was I've been doing quite a bit of work in the public eye in entertainment industry at that point, for quite a few years. So I had connections, and my first sponsors for the year were a lingerie company, a makeup company, superfood company, and a jewelry company. So not the basic or the usual high altitude climber sponsors.
Has that then, as you've kind of gotten into the community, have they received you as one of their own, or have you always been like here comes the model, here comes the social media girl, or do you think that they've kind of influenced or accepted you? And I don't mean that like you shouldn't be, but you know what I mean.
No, I get it. Yeah. Well, one of my goals in life, or kind of like themes in life, has been just breaking barriers or glass ceilings. I feel like whatever I've done in my life, whether it's been working as a very young store manager, or jumping from I graduated from business and economics, and then it suddenly became Miss Finland, and just like I've had quite quick turnarounds, or people have felt like they're quick turnarounds, but for me it has all been based in curiosity and where I've felt like my attraction point in life is, and it's adventure, and it's going towards fear, and it's going towards challenges. So yeah, I've definitely noticed that there is this like I've been called a mascot, like when I was doing a winter expedition on Broad Peak with two of the best climbers in the world. People outside, like we were three people on this mountain. It was around, I'd say, I don't know Fahrenheit that well, but I know -40 Celsius and -40 Fahrenheit are the same. So it was around that
Yeah, yeah.
temperature. We're climbing blue, yeah, we're climbing blue ice. It's like you make one mistake, you're at the bottom of the mountain, and kilometers of like just climbing ice. So it was definitely very cool for me, like a big learning curve, but at the same time, I did hold my own. I carried my weight, and I I had like righteously I had my place in that team. So hearing stuff like, "Oh, who's carrying your makeup and she's just a mascot?" I'm like, "You'll see. It's not my business." Like if someone has these prejudices, it's more their problem than mine.
What I guess what do you like what keeps you coming back? What do you think is like the ultimate draw of it for you?
Putting myself out there, facing the challenges, feeling discomfort, going towards things that might feel scary. I don't really ever feel scared. I acknowledge that this is like a dangerous situation, but I need to focus really, really hard, and I can mitigate the situation. That's what I bring into my training. Like I train, depending on the cycle, but 20 to 30 hours a week of endurance during the endurance period. And then we have like more technical training periods or cycles, and more like strength based. But I just I work my ass off. So I bring that idea of like this will make me be better in this and this situation. I can take on the mountain. Like every time I go to a mountain, I want to take the mountain on its terms and not bring the mountain down to my level.
Has there been a shift in climbing like this? I don't know if this is the right word, the climbing like ethos or perspective in which, I used to watch these things about, right, like the documentary going up Everest, and I always wondered, like, it looks like somebody else is doing all the work, right? Like they got the Sherpas just fixing the ropes and carrying the stuff. Has
Yeah.
there been a shift where like, no, you got to do this whole thing yourself?
Um, I hope there is a bit more, but I do see more and more of this kind of. I mean, last year on Broad Peak, it ended up in a death of a climber because there were people who were not experienced enough to be there. And we were involved in a few rescue operations, and it just, I wish there was more of this. I will apprentice and like take a step by step by step. But nowadays, because this is an exaggeration, but you kind of want the picture on the summit on your Instagram page. And then to get there, you need to use a lot of money and just pay for someone to get you up there. It's that then when something goes wrong, you don't know what to do, and people don't know what to do.
When you go in terms of like, all right, from your average mountain, obviously it's different for every single one, but is it generally like how long of a trip are you usually looking at? You've got to it's going to take you this long, you got to cover this many kilometers, this much vertical. Like I know that every mountain is obviously different, but in general, kind of like what are you preparing for?
Like you said, every mountain is different, but basically I would say that the higher the mountain, the longer you need to be on the mountain or at the base of the mountain, acclimatizing, waiting for weather windows. Like that's the most, to me, it's the hardest part of expeditions. Like you might sit in base camp for 10 days, just waiting for the weather window to open. So you get to like either go up and acclimatize or have a summit push. But um, an 8,000 meter peak, so there are 14 8,000 meter peaks in the world, and they usually take about 2 months, even more, to climb. But then you go to 7,000, like Aconcagua in South America, in Argentina, and it's 1,000 meters lower and 3 weeks max.
There's that much of a difference just in that 1,000 meters.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Is that just because that an 8,000 meter peak is that much bigger than a 7,000 meter peak, or because having that much less oxygen is going to take you that much longer?
Yeah, it's the oxygen.
So if you go above like the death zone, right? Like the thing that I've always heard is that, okay, your body is basically dying once you're up here. Once you go back below, are you like, you're back to normal, or are there long-term effects that like you have taken this out of your body and it's not coming back?
In general, I always do feel weaker after a long expedition, but the use of supplemental oxygen, that helps a lot in mitigating those symptoms. Like you're just not functioning the same way. Like especially when you're climbing without supplemental oxygen, it compromises like all of the functions of your body. Like when we went on winter Broad Peak, my climbing partner told me like it's 50-50 that you'll lose a finger or a nose or something, because when you're just, your blood circulation doesn't work the same way, it doesn't work as effectively, and the first place it leaves is your fingers or like the extremities of your body. Yeah, and there is a saying that we do lose brain cells up in the higher elevations, so
Yeah.
not sure if we can ever recover those, but
Yeah,
oh well.
that's a debatable topic. We did have a neuroscientist on once who said, "Oh, you kind of replace them, but you just don't replace the ones you really
Oh, I hope
need."
so.
That's what he's like. You replace the ones that are kind of like keep your body moving, but not the ones. Now, does it affect like your decision making at all?
Yes, it does affect your decision making, and you just feel like your brains work much slower. So far, I've felt pretty good. Like as high as I've gone, I've always felt in control. And that's the thing. You have to make the decision beforehand that you will never, because every time you put yourself in a position where something bad can happen to you, you're compromising the lives and the safety of everyone else on the mountain as well. Like personally, if there is something going wrong, I've left a summit push 3 times, or I've failed on. Well, failed to me, it wasn't a failure because it was such a big, cool adventure in general, and like I don't go on these mountains for the summit; I go for the journey. But 3 times I've left a mountain without a summit because there has been a rescue situation. Whether no matter how like involved I've been, but still I've taken that step back. And a lot of people, when they go on these mountains, they think that this is what they would do, but you sort of go into a default mode, and you see a lot of this kind of people come back and say that I never thought I would behave or act that way.
Is that a common thing though up there? Like, look, you get in trouble, nobody's coming for you.
You can't go there and expect someone to help you. And that's one of the issues that a lot of people do when they pay big money, that someone's going to help you. But you got to be there with an attitude and with the knowledge that if everything else disappears around you, like your safety net, every other person, you don't have ropes. Ropes are taken down by an avalanche. You're just left with your ice tools, your ice axes, and your crampons that you can get down the mountain by yourself. But a lot of people rely on the ropes so much. Like you don't necessarily even need to bring an ice axe to Everest nowadays anymore, because you can just use this jumar thingy that you slide up the rope and it doesn't come down.
But that, is that for more kind of the like the tourist alpinist stuff, right? Like The hardcore of the
That
hardcore
is
isn't doing that though.
90, no, 95%, 90 to 95% of people who go up on these expeditions nowadays climb like that.
Wow.
But it's made easy, so like why not?
Has then like for people who are still kind of looking for like the true experience then, like where are they going for that, right? Like if Everest is now Disney World, I'm being dramatic obviously, but if Everest is now like Disney
Yeah, I
World,
get.
like where are you going for the real stuff?
Well, definitely the 14 8,000-meter peaks are very popular at the moment. That's kind of like the, I don't know if you've heard of the seven summits,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's like climbing the highest mountain of every continent. And now it's become more like the 14 8,000-meter peaks. So you climb all the 8,000-meter peaks in the world. But I'd say that a lot of uh, a lot of climbers that I know and climb with are looking for experiences outside the normal routes, and that's kind of where. Okay, let's just say that I'm gravitated towards routes outside of the normal routes. So it's more about just me and the mountain, or just me, my climbing partner, and the mountain. So that's where my future goals are and future plans. It doesn't have to be an 8,000-meter peak. There are a bunch of mountains that you throw a rock in the air and it reaches 8,000. So it's like I'm I'm cool with the height not starting with an 8, as long as it's a fun route.
Are you ready for some harder slash listener submitted questions?
Yes.
Did you hear my voice crack when I said that? Like I was a 13-year-old boy. I've been a little sniffly.
Okay.
um,
Okay, well now I'm not sure if I'm ready
I
anymore,
know,
but okay,
right?
let's go.
Right. I like this question. Can you enjoy it?
Okay.
Or is it so physically difficult that you're just suffering through the whole thing?
Oh, I absolutely love the suffering. It's like that's why you go there. You feel so alive when you're just so focused in the moment. Like there's no room for any other stress factors other than where you are at the moment. And I don't know, I get this weird kick. Like the harder it gets, I'm like, oh, now we're getting started. So I do a lot of ultra runs as well. So the first 15 hours is boring because you're just like, can the suffering start already? And then you're like, okay, now it gets interesting.
But does that ruin everyday life then, right? Because I know that like people like yourselves, you go on these massive adventures, but that can't be that much. Like, does it ruin then the kind of commonality of everyday life where like, all right, Tuesday's laundry day? Does it make everything else seem less impressive?
I get what you mean. I do a lot of stuff that feels interesting and like even training that you tell someone to go on a stair stepper for 5 hours inside what look like just staring at the same wall. You just change your mentality. You're like, okay, well, not most people couldn't do this or wouldn't want to do this, so I'll take the challenge on and see how I can make this interesting.
You've been on a Stairmaster for 5 hours straight?
Yes, yes, 5 days in a week.
That sounds like the worst experience in all of life. That sounds terrible. What do you do? Like, how do you, are you just watching movies?
It's no, I answer or reply to emails and messages, and sometimes I do like Instagram Q&As and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you would have
So
to.
I always invent things. Yeah, listen to
Five
music.
5 hours on a Stairmaster. Oh my gosh.
That's like an average. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6, and yeah,
Oh, only 4 hours on it. Man. So then how many calories do you have to eat in a day?
a lot. I have zero food rules other than not have food rules and eat a lot.
Yeah. Now, will your body go through big changes during one of those expeditions, right? Like we just had a guy on that was solo sailing around the world, and he would say, well, when I sail from LA to Hawaii, I know I'm going to lose 25 pounds.
So I always try to gain weight before I go on an expedition, which is sometimes hard because you're just training so much. But you do lose some body mass. Mostly it's muscle, which sucks. So that's why you can't really go on back-to-back expeditions if you're climbing without supplemental oxygen, because the effect is bigger that way. But then I just eat a lot in base camp.
Just
It's
eat as much as you
just
can get.
it's like, yeah, I try to aim at four to 5,000 calories.
How do you go to the bathroom up there?
That is always the second question. Like whenever I'm in a public speaking situation, people like try to soften things up with another question, and then they go to that. So there depends if you're in base camp or if you're up on the mountain. But let's just say that, for example, if you're going for number two, sometimes your climbing partner has to belay you from the tent so that you can go down a little, like roped up. And there's situations where you're doing that stuff in very sketchy places, just hoping that your tombstone won't say that died while pooping. But it's like a bathroom with a view.
That's it. That actually leads us perfectly in this next question. What's the
Mm,
view like?
okay, amazing. This is what I tell people, that because many people think that you need to get to the summit to enjoy the view, but wherever you are in life and whatever your journey or mountain, it's like look back, like every 10 or 100 or at least 1,000 meters, and just enjoy where you are. Look back how far you've come. And that actually works as a pretty good analogy for a lot of things in life, but always look back to see how far you've come.
Scariest situation you have ever faced?
This was one of those good lessons as well. Um, we were coming down from Broad Peak last summer, and I was sort of like, it didn't focus anymore because we're almost off the mountain, and there's a big crevasse at the base of the mountain, or Bergschrund is the real name, but it's like a crevasse, and there's a snow bridge on top of it. So basically, it's like a very, you never know how thick the snow bridge is and when it will collapse. But there was like an obvious spot where you need to go over it, and then a spot where you definitely don't want to go over it. And I was just, I don't know, focusing on the French fries and pancakes in base camp that I was going to get soon. So I just didn't look. And I was unroped. I had my ice axe in my other hand, crampons on, and I was holding on to a rope. So that was a very good thing, but kind of loosely. And then the snow bridge just collapsed underneath me. And somehow I was able to just get my ice axe in, my crampons in, and hold on to the rope, and got myself from like out of there. And I was just laughing hysterically. That was like a weird reaction, but I was just like, that was close. And my climbing partner was like, what did you just do? Why didn't you watch where you were going? And yeah, so finish with focus.
Man.
That's a good lesson.
And then I would imagine if you wouldn't have stopped, then that was the end.
Yeah.
That close, that quickly, right? Like that kind of, and here's like this. Yeah. This is another question we got, is like, where do people die? Like what kills people up on the mountains?
So high altitude sickness is definitely one of the reasons. So either your brains or your lungs start filling up with water, and because of the altitude, you can look those up if you want to know more. But then I think the objective dangers are always there, but those you can mitigate by learning to read the mountain. Sometimes you need to roll the dice a little and understand that you are taking some certain risk. So rockfall, avalanches, severe weather, like the weather changes, cold, but then other people is one of the dangers nowadays as well, especially if you're on a very popular route and there is some sort of things like etiquette that not everyone necessarily knows. For example, if you kick a rock, you're supposed to yell rock like really hard. I almost got killed last summer with someone dropping a rock that went like that close to my head at, I don't know, but must have been at least like 50 miles per hour speed, and this big chunk. And it was like if it would have hit my face, I would have dropped right there.
Man.
So, and then just your own mistakes. That's one thing.
But
ropes that break.
On pretty much every expedition, are you going to have like, yeah, you're pretty much going to almost die on every expedition at some point?
I hope not. I hope not. I don't think I've had like things that could have ended badly on a lot of expeditions, but then there's a lot of situations where you know that you made the right call, and then that's why nothing happened. So I think it's a lot about learning and knowing what you're getting into so that you can mitigate those risks and just train your butt off so that you'll be faster on the mountain, so you'll be less exposed to the objective risks. But just I hope it won't be every time that there is a story like that. Last summer was just crazy. It was like gut punch after gut punch and gut punch. And then you get up again, and then you fall down again, and you get up again. So it was a hard one. But I published a book about it, so that's
cool.
That became a good adventure.
Good for you.
And it was actually, yeah. And in the end, I was so exhilarated that it was like every single time I was brought down, we still got back up. So it was just like testing your strength. And in the end, I was like, cool, I actually was able to get up every time that something happened. Like, just even through like frustration and tears, I'd still get back up on my feet and try again until my visa ended, and then we left the country.
Ultimately, it comes down to the government, doesn't it? Right? Like, I can beat the weather and the mountain and myself, but the government red tape is what's ultimately going to stop me.
Yeah.
That's what is your holy grail? What's the thing that like, ooh, this is what I want to do?
I don't think I can tell you, because this has happened to me before, that I've said my dreams out loud and then someone else went and did it, because that's our sort of how we what we aspire to do is do. And I haven't really done anything. I mean, I've done cool stuff, but nothing that has gone in the history books yet. So, or history books. But yeah, there are.
You got to keep it secret.
New routes, new routes, or first attempts or first summits that I'd like to do.
That makes sense, right? Like, you can't tip your hat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if you tell like I want to be the first woman to do this and this, or the first person to do this and this. It's often with the mountains, it's like there is no he or she. You just
right.
The mountain doesn't care if you're a man or a woman.
What is your favorite climbing related movie?
Favorite climbing related movie? I don't watch a lot of them because I pick them apart a lot. Like, I'll be like, they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be doing that. That's not possible to do that, and that kind of stuff. So I would think I watched Everest, the 96 year tragedy, and I was just like, I couldn't focus because I was just annoyed by little mistakes.
What is something though that like you would notice that I wouldn't notice at all? Like, climbers like yourself would be like, oh my God, that drives me nuts. But for me, I wouldn't notice at all.
Like a thing, like someone being without proper eye shields high up in altitude, and you're just like, that person's gonna burn their eyes. Like, you just gotta put your sunglasses on or you're gonna burn your eyes. I've done that a few times and it's so painful. But I have never gone snow blind, but I've like had the worst feeling in my eyes. And in a lot of these movies, there's just people like hanging out up there without their eye shields or with their gloves for a really long time, and you're just like, that person might lose a finger soon, and that kind of stuff. Or then like looking at their harnesses and being like, I wonder why they're carrying that thing up this mountain, because every single gram counts, but why are that kind of thing.
I have
equipment.
I have once also burned my eyes, and that was the worst. Like, oh my gosh, that's the worst.
It's so painful. Yeah.
It's awful. You don't make that mistake again.
I've made it twice.
Well, I didn't make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Well, you are not ready for these mountains. Let me tell you, as a person who has walked 10 miles once, you are not prepared. Get out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
Best food to eat after getting off the mountain.
French fries and pancakes.
Oh, yeah.
They just like they're awesome in base camp for some reason. Like they're at 5,000 meters in base camp. They're just the best. I think it's the saltiness of the French fries that helps. Like you need salt right
Oh,
after.
I could see that. That's pretty much all the questions I have. Is there like anything else that you think we missed, or like what's kind of coming up next for you?
Well, next for me is this exciting new adventure. So I'm part of Sports Illustrated Swim Search, and there were thousands of applications, and 13 were chosen. We did a photo shoot in Dominican Republic. I believe, at least what I saw from the screen, that these shots will be amazing. So, yeah, part of that.
Is that kind of like what's that like? Is it what you expected, or is it like, whoa, this is really something big?
Well, definitely, whoa, this is something really big. I mean, the atmosphere at the shoot was just something out of this world. I've never been at a shoot like that. And I think it was mostly because the way everyone was just so kind of, I have this saying about redefining femininity. And I've been told so many times on the mountains that don't bring out your femininity or your feminine side because that'll make you less legitimate of a climber. And I don't understand that. And this is kind of like the message I got about being part of the swim search as well. And there, so I've decided that anything that I do on the mountains, because I'm doing it as a woman, it's feminine. Like if whether it's peeing in a bottle or taking some cool dress photos up on a glacier or up on the mountain, that's feminine to me. And the way SI redefines femininity, like for example, I have vitiligo, which is like some parts of my body just don't um, get a tan or color. So they were just like before in photo shoots, everyone's been photoshopping them or trying to cover them up with makeup and that kind of stuff. And they were just like, we love your vitiligo. We want to show it off rather than cover it up. So there's this kind of the message that they have is so powerful because it's you actually get to be yourself. Like I for 1 second I didn't feel too short or too this or too that. Like what you always kind of feel like you're trying to measure up to some sort of standard when you're at a photo shoot, like or any photo shoot I've ever done before. And this was just like, be you. We love you the way you are. And yeah, and that's the message they put out. Like I think they put it out really well for all the world to see. So it's really cool. They're very powerful that way.
You know, we talked a little bit about the idea, like the mountain doesn't care what you look like or if you're a
Yeah,
man or a woman. Do you
yeah.
get pushback, right? Like, is it different being a woman in what I would assume is kind of a boys' club, or do I know nothing about this?
You're pretty much right. You either need to kind of, like I said, bring out your traditional femininity less, or then you're considered a mascot. And I think um, I like proving people wrong, so I don't mind.